Hey, brothers and sisters, what's up? This is the Reluctant IB back again. And we are discussing what needs to be said. This is real talk. This is the conversation that needs to be had. The blacks who owned slaves were the children of white men and black women, but, deeper than that, they were black women. The majority of black slave owners were black women. We'll get into that, right? There is a reason why they're so angry because they used to be able to, well, rule over you, the complete opposite of what the scriptures used to say. And when they did, only they prospered. They used everybody to get what they want. They used the man, the children, everything. We're going to dig deep in that, right? So, Hawarden Hardu follow way to the vein, Fosses Los Bonjamizmi, Keto Bawani Konichiwa, Nihao Niama, Sani Ponani, John Port Bagani, Assalamu alaikum and shalom. And keep in mind, all these links will be in the description box. All right? Pay attention, y'all. Let me remind you, let's get those thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. When you subscribe, click the notification bell. Although my PayPal me link will be in the description box for those that like to help me do what I do in the community and help this channel out, remember you always take care of your home self, family first. All right, that goes to you brothers and sisters. All right, so and let me remind you, get those thumbs up. So even as I'm speaking right now, take a look down to the right and click the thumbs up button. Because any of the wicked ones that come to this channel, the first thing they're going to do, they're not going to watch the video, but they will click the thumbs down button. All right. So we got to combat all of that. All right. So let's get into the breakdown. When digging into the weeds, we come across just a lot of information on this, right? Domestic slavery was quite common in West Africa. That's why West Africa is doing so bad right now. Keep in mind that when they sold people to the Caucasians to bring out of Africa, to get them out of Africa, they took the brightest, the strongest, out of envy and everything. So the Africans are the one that kidnapped us. You know, all these Pan-Africanists talking about, oh, let's get back to West Africa Africans. That's how Caucasian men were able to obtain us. All right. Now, keep in mind, we were sold out by our own and the natives, the other Indians here, because there were black people that were native to this land, along with the Mongolian people, which we commonly refer to as the red man. So you had Afroid featured black melanated people, as we say, that was native to the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, and Brazil. The oldest bones found in the Americas, there were some found in the United States that belonged to Afro people, and in Brazil that belonged to Afro people. And as y'all remember, I put that video up with the finding. All right. So, although the Europeans organized the trade much to a greater magnitude and value, free black slave owners resided in the states as north as New York and as far south as Florida. All right, extending westward into Kentucky, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri. According to federal census of 1830, free blacks owned more than 10,000 slaves in Louisiana. And remember, Louisiana was owned by the French, and French had wives and they had their mistresses, which were the black women. The black women lived side by side with the Caucasian women. Remember the history lesson I gave you when we talked about the birth of jazz and how that happened, right? When the French left, they took their Caucasian wives, but they left the slaves in land to, yes, the mulattoes and their black wives. So the black wives owned Afro men. Okay, Maryland. Let's continue with Maryland, South Carolina, and Virginia. The majority of black slave owners lived in Louisiana and planted sugar cane. The majority of black masters have not been slaves themselves, right? So again, these were women that wasn't being um, physically assaulted by the Caucasian men. They were giving it up willingly, and they got a lot in return. This is why when I was talking about Dr. Joy DeGruy, when she was reading from the slave narratives, that the slaves themselves said that they seen more black men raped by the Caucasian men than black women. All right. So, yet the ranks of black slave masters were diverse. Some acquired slaves as soon as they had accumulated enough capital after their own freedom. Others received slaves with their own freedom from their white masters. We'll get into the name for that. And others have been free for several generations. All right, so let's get further into this. All right, so we talk about the different types of backgrounds that these women have, right? Free black masters used slaves to work their farms as skilled and unskilled workers in urban centers and as hired workers to other employers. Although some black masters, such as those in Louisiana, owned scores of slaves and large tracts of land, this is how these black women in Louisiana came to own these land. Because when Napoleon was beat by the Haitians in Haiti, all right, that's whose army that was beat. He sold his swath of the United States to Thomas Jefferson, which is known as the Louisiana Purchase. When this happened, right, the French start leaving out, but they left since they had concubines that were black women. They took their wives, left the black women, and left them the land and the slaves. And when they left them the slaves, they left them a bunch of slaves. Those who did not own these lands and stuff fell under English or the United States rule with the one drop rule, meaning that if you were mulatto or black and you had one drop, then you were considered black. Whereas when the French was there, you were considered who your father was. So the French educated their children, the black ones so called, and the white ones the same way. They sent them to the same schools in France. This is how jazz was born. It was born out of the parlor music of the French with the ability to read and understand music and the improvisation of the Afro slave people that was here in the United States that learned to play the music with the same level of skill, but without the knowledge of the theory. You merge them two together, you have jazz. They learned the parlor songs from the French children, offspring, when they were forced to live together because of the sale of the Louisiana Purchase. So this is why jazz was born. Napoleon don't lose Haiti. This jazz is never born. So rock and roll is never born, pop music, all the rest of the stuff that can't come with it. But when they move this over, the blues, everything is based on the blues. The three, well, we ain't going to get into that. All right, but jazz is jazz. Jazz turned into blues. The blues turned into everything else. All right. So what happened is now you have this merge of ideas from mulatto, so-called blacks to the regular Afro blacks, the fathers, the children of Afro men. Bam, jazz. But also, bam, a lot of wealth that went to the black women and slaves who they treated worse than the white people. Oh, well, we'll get to that. All right. So The South Carolina Act of 1806 required slaves who lived outside the master's household to have written permission from their masters to do so. So you always needed the permission of the black woman to make a move if you were an Afro man or the white man. So these were the two people that primarily owned you. And let's not get it twisted. White women own people too. But why do we talk about the black woman? Because the black women are the ones talking about they had the black man's back, that they always had love for. No, they never had love for us. And you know that because there are so many single black men that the black women have put through hell. Who hurt you? The black women said, somebody must have hurt you. Yes, the black women did. If they didn't, we would be living in peace. But see, this leaps over their head. All right, because they want to do damage, and then they want you to hide your eyes from the damage that they do. The statute also made it illegal to rent lots, houses, or enclosures directly to slaves. Some scholars explain the large number of slaves living in black households in Charleston, for example, as the slaves were merely boarders. But the detailed tax and manuscript census records show that the slaves boarding cannot account for the majority of recorded slave holdings amongst free blacks in Charleston. Ruh-roh. Something, 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 something just ain't right. Let's get into what just ain't right. So, here is something that I want you to understand. All right. That everybody that supported the destruction of the Afro people, the black women were for. Remember, this woman's model was the mother of eugenics, who created a system that wanted the Afro man everywhere destroyed, wiped off the face of the planet. And who supported Hillary? The black women and their brain dead, non-thinking simps who supported a woman whose model was that who wanted us exterminated. But let's kind of break some stuff down. Descendants of mulatto slave owners who were intermarried with Indians often rejected their African ancestry and passed as free Indians. Why? No tax, which allowed them to avoid paying state capitation tax. Okay, we're going to break this down what this is. Pay attention to this. This is why the United States owe Afro men reparations that all free blacks were required to pay. All free blacks were required to pay this tax for merely being free. The United States taxed so-called black people for being free in this country. They taxed black people for being free. The United States owe us between 16 and 60-year-old for men and 14 and 55 for women. And they were permitted to give sworn testimony in court, litigation concerning the race of other Indian-blooded blacks. Ooh, so there's a lot of Indian-blooded blacks, right? Because at this time, it was clear that there were melanated natives that were called Indians, the red men that was called Indians. And then there was the Africans. Remember, Africans that were brought to the United States only numbered in the 300,000. So they can't possibly count for the millions of Africans that were here unless they were already here as natives, as aboriginal, which history shows that they were here first, then the red men. But they try to get rid of that in history, the same way that they don't teach you this in history. They tell you there were black slaves, but they don't go into depth with who they were. All right. So in South Carolina, the courts decided that 1/4 to 1/8 Negro ancestry or 3 generations would make a person white. That means when a black woman slept with a white man and then her daughter slept with a white man, then her granddaughter slept with a white man, the offspring of that relationship would be considered white. This is why the black women tried to stick with white so much back then. You know, Lena Horne passing as white, right? And we talked about the movie Imitation of Life. All right, so in 1820, the South Carolina legislature passed an act that banned personal manumission, freeing slaves. That's what manumission means, when the master personally frees a slave, right? And only by petition of both houses of the legislature could slaves be freed. So they took it out of the hands of the masters, and then the state got involved. So the state got involved to make sure that black people, the government got involved to make sure that black people stayed slaves. Ooh, let's break it down some more. All right, keep this in mind as we talk about the movie Get Out. All right, how is the Afro man going to escape the trap, right? And that is by understanding that things that were meant to be secret from him, he better learn about quickly. The biggest secret they try to keep up is that the majority of black slave owners were black women. All right, in 1820, free black women represented 68% of heads of household and 70% of slave-holding heads of colored household. The large percentage of black women slave owners is explained by the combination effect of manumission, that means freed by their white master for whom they fathered children, inheritance, so they were inherited slaves, and receiving slaves from their white master's relatives. So even other white people gave black women slaves, and even husbands who had a higher mortality rate than the women. And personal industry, once they were free, buying slaves themselves. Understand this about the black woman. So everybody was giving her wealth, privilege, and everything. This is why black women should not get reparations. They were not the ones being persecuted. We were taught that, right? But the truth of the matter is they were using what she had to get what she wanted. Remember, most black women came over as concubines and wives of the slavers because they married them in Africa. Remember, 2/3 of the slaves that came over here were men, not women. So where did all these women come from? They were, and why so few? Because the ones that came over were concubines, and only a few domestic women came over. They weren't intended to work the field. They came over to support the concubines. And that went haywire. Read Daughters of the Trade. Read the book, Daughters of the Trade. It'll be eye-opening. Understand this, black women were the majority of slaves emancipated by white slaves, slave owning men with whom they had sexual relations. The misogynist nature of South Carolina society is nowhere better revealed than by the fact that 33% of all recorded colonial manumissions were mulatto children, and 75% of all adult manumissions were females. So they freed more black women than even the mulatto children. They have freed more black women than they freed the children. This is why you see the black women being so heinous towards children now. We see this death and destruction of children, young children, in the most heinous way, starved to death and all the rest of this stuff by the black woman. because she never really cared about us. She don't care about the Afro man seed. Her love is for wickedness, right? We'll get into that at another time. If homosexual relations existed between black male slaves and their white masters, which that was the true rape, is called buck breaking, right? These relations was not directly acknowledged through manumission. In other words, nobody let the man, they raped him, but they didn't let him go free. But then you have destroyed him, all right? By 1830 in Charleston, 65% of black slave owners bought slaves for profit rather than to free family members. 65% of black slave owners bought slaves for profit rather than to free family members, as indicated in registered documents. Black slave owners, remember, these are black women, often owned family members and slaves that they used in their business. This is the black women. So remember, the black slave owners does not refer to Afro men whose father were Afro men. This is primarily 70% black women, 30% mulattoes. But 8% of, hold on, get this. Black slave owners were often owned family members and slaves that they used in their businesses. So black women have been using family and everybody else as a check. So now it shouldn't surprise you that as to why they take a man before child support and call the police on him all the time, because they always saw us as nothing but a check or a resource to get something to try to get close to the white man who they really love. But only 8% of black slave owners who recorded slave transactions were truly benevolent. Only 8% masters buying a slave's family member, such as their spouses, children, and their relatives. So only 8% of these women did that. Oh, but they bought a lot to make them work for them, like how she wants you to work for her now. So when we get back to this, we got Barack Obama thanking, being grateful to Planned Parenthood. God bless you, right? How is God going to bless somebody that wants the Afro people destroyed? Oh, because he thinks it's only Afro Americans, right? And because he's neither, he's an African, he's Kenyan, and his mom is white, so he don't know our story. Yeah, he went to the hood for a little bit, but he was raised privileged. That's how you become president. So it was easy for him to turn his back and lie on the Afro man when the Afro man is the one holding it down, not the black woman. All right, and then Hillary Clinton. I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage and tenacity, her vision, and taking on archetypes, taking on attitudes and accusations following from all directions. I am really in awe of her, and there are a lot of lessons we can learn from her life and from the cause she launched and fought for and sacrificed so bravely. Hillary Clinton 2009 Planned Parenthood Honors Gala. And remember, this is what Margaret Sanger said. Colored people are like weeds and are to be exterminated. What did Margaret Sanger, 1926, Silver Lake, New Jersey, at a KKK rally? That's the woman Hillary Clinton admire. And think about this. And black women admire Hillary Clinton. Ruh-roh. All right. In this marriage.com, right? The faces of racism in the South. This is how everything plays into the marriage license. Remember, I said the marriage license is new. And North Carolina, well, we'll discuss what happened. It is widely reported 1741, the colony of North Carolina took judicial control over marriages. They took judicial control over marriage. Before that, there was no one to control who was allowed to become a wife of somebody. And whoever the man got with and the woman got with was recognized as husband and wife once they set up a house and lived together. What we now call common law. And so before 1741, there were no marriage license. But the courts wanted to take North Carolina, took judicial control over it, right? Um, and the reason was interracial marriages. And they did it to prohibit interracial marriages by issuing marriage license to those deemed acceptable for marriage. Meaning that if you as a white man, they weren't going to give you the license and recognize you if you got with a black woman. So the state picks and chooses who it recognizes. It has nothing to do with the state has nothing to do with God. When you give yourself a license, then you'll have nothing to do with God. By the 1920, more than 38 states in the U.S. have crafted similar policy and laws. All right, so in the 1920s, in 1924, it was absolutely illegal for partners from two races to marry. That got changed in 1967 by Virginia, Loving versus Virginia. All right, so prior to the 18th century, marriages in the United States remained the primary responsibility of local churches and or private people. A church issued marriage license and was signed by an official. All right. Prior to the church doing it before England, where the acronym fornication under consent of king, prior to that, nobody was in charge of it. You went to the father. All right. So all this is new. All right. I want y'all to understand this. So the marriage license, it was dominated by the church and the state took it from the church. All right, but the church had nothing to do with God. They was getting the money, and the state wanted the money, so they said, church, we getting all this money. And so if you go back and read, the reason why the rest of the United States got involved with the marriage thing was, as you read at the bottom, a consistent revenue stream. Further, the issuance of a license provided a consistent revenue stream. Y'all better read this. A consistent revenue stream. So the next time you look at this, no, they don't have your back. They're looking for ways to stab you in it. Right? No, they do not have your back. Remember, they're trying to, level up into wickedness. That's why a lot of these black women are going from the church into witchcraft. They're trying to seek to get some spiritual power because they lack no morality, no power, no loyalty, no nothing. An empty shell. All right, we got sisters trying to seek out the brothers. But we're looking at our adversary people. And this is how they see us. They're mean mugging because they're upset that we are free men making decisions for ourselves, understanding that we are completely on our own right now. Oh, and they're mad about it because they used to own the Afro man. They used to have all them privilege that was given to them by this country, the state. That's why the black women should not have reparations. Now, the black women will get it if they are united with the black man. Period. But as an individual, no, because they had all the privileges, they had all the rights, even those superior to married white women. And they were getting all the benefits of laying up with the white master. All right. At the end of the day, this is how they want the black men kneeling before them. And think about this. A black man wrote this. That's how much of a sellout he is. This is what they want. They want the black men to give up their strength and kneel before him. But what this proverb says, give not thy strength to a woman whose ways destroy kings. That's why we need to seek out women from other communities. Remember, this is a no depolicing zone. And now you're figuring out why we need to do what we need to do. And while we need to leave the D police to hit the wall with the black woman. With that said, I'm out.